So today I would like to give a talk about the Noble Eightfold Path. Every bhikkhu should talk about the Noble Eightfold Path at least once, and I never have talked about the Noble Eightfold Path because I haven't given many Dhamma talks. So I would like to talk today about the Noble Eightfold Path. But when we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, we somewhat also have to talk about the Four Noble Truths, because the Noble Eightfold Path is kind of the solution to the problem stated in the Four Noble Truths, or maybe we should better say the problem is stated in the First Noble Truth, the cause of the problem is stated in the Second Noble Truth, the promise in regard to the problem is stated in the Third Noble Truth, and the solution proper is the Fourth Noble Truth, that is the Noble Eightfold Path. So let's begin with first stating what's the problem. Well, you may ask people what's their problem. Most people have some problem, and that's the problem. That life somewhat, for most people, isn't just a journey of bliss without obstruction, isn't just a stroll through a pleasure garden, but most people face problems in their life. Most people encounter suffering, coarse or less coarse, but most people know something to tell about suffering. Nobody can escape it. And that's the first noble truth that the Buddha gave, that life is full of uncertainties, life is full of difficulties, life is full of unpleasantries. And because the Buddha made that a central part of his teachings, that is perhaps the reason why Buddhism became kind of famous, because most people feel, well, seems to be something about it. What he said seems to be somehow true, even if perhaps we wouldn't easily talk about it with everyone, especially those who are in the full vigor of life. It's not the topic you would talk about with your mates. It's how clever you are, all the clever things you're doing, and you convince everyone that you're the master of your life. But the Buddha gave out this teaching not as something to talk about with your mates necessarily, but as something that each individual may use and take a look at and see how it relates to their lives. And once we discovered that it's somewhat true what the Buddha said, that there is suffering, we might want to take a look at, or we might want to take a closer look at what the Buddha had to say about it. So the Buddha declared birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering, disease is suffering, not getting what you want is suffering, getting what you do not want is suffering. And he summed it all up by declaring that, in short, the 5 basic components of phenomenal existence are suffering. Now, I just state briefly the 5 basic components of phenomenal existence. I don't want to go too deep into it. They are matter, mind, feeling, perception, and consciousness. So all that we are is suffering. That's the basic statement. Everything is suffering. Now, we may not entirely agree with that. And actually the word dukkha that the Buddha used does not just mean suffering. It means anything no good. Anything that's no good. We can say also anything that's less than perfect. So we might find it easier to agree with that. But then the Buddha gave also some reason why there is this dukkha. And he formulated these reasons at times differently. Sometimes he would state that ignorance is the cause of this whole dukkha. Sometimes he would say craving is the cause of this whole dukkha, or ignorance and craving are the causes of this dukkha. But the most famous one is the statement about the whole law of becoming, paticca samuppada in Pali, which is usually translated as the law of dependent origination. A big phrase, which I never really liked. That's why I translate it differently, and I prefer to call it the law of becoming, which basically states that because there is darkness to begin with, because there's ignorance, because there's not understanding of the entirety of life, because of that there's the creation of karma. There is wanting something more, having more questions, having more goals, having more desires, which in Buddhism are called sankharas, which can be translated as karmical formations or mental formations. It is this surging up of mind that needs to know, that needs to have, that needs to attain. And because of that, there arises consciousness. Now these upsurging impulses, which want to know, which want to have, which want to attain, they create or cause into existence a consciousness that perceives a world out there. So if we would not have any intention to see something, to know something, to have something, then that consciousness would not be there. There would be nothing that consciousness would focus on, that consciousness would know, because it does not want to know. Now, if you're forced to read some entirely boring book that you have no interest in knowing anything in it, and then even you read it, you don't know anything, you will not remember anything, your consciousness will not really become aware of anything. And this is stating it simplified. We see things that we want to see, or that we have some business with. If we have no more business with anything, then there is nothing our mind would settle on, or our consciousness would settle on. But then based on this consciousness that perceives some world out there that we have some business with, a mind arises that creates ideas about that world, that thinks about that world. In Pali that's called Nama, and the world that is perceived out there is called Rupa. So because of consciousness there is Nama Rupa, mind and matter, some world out there that we think about, that we are mentally involved with. And once there's this world out there that we somewhat have some business with, we use our senses in order to know that world more fully, to explore that world. We have eyes, we have ears, we have nose and tongue and a body, and these are in perpetual contact with that world out there. And because these senses are in perpetual contact with that world out there that we apparently have some business with, we feel sometimes pleasant feelings, sometimes we feel unpleasant feelings, and sometimes we feel just neutral feelings. Usually we feel pleasant feelings when things are going well for us, when we contact something that we like, something that feels good, hears good, tastes good, looks good. But when we see something that doesn't look good, or we feel something that doesn't feel good, or we hear something that doesn't sound good, then we usually feel unpleasant feelings. And when we experience neither, then the feeling is usually just neutral. But most of the time we feel something, or much of the time we feel something. And because we feel something, we very often develop thirst for things, desire for things. We want more of the pleasant things, and we want less of the unpleasant things. And when these are our desires and aversions, and when they become more strong, they become something like a feature of us. They are our particular attachments. They are our particular habits, which don't just arise when there is a pleasant or unpleasant sight or sound or taste, but which arises even in the absence of these things. So they become our attachments, and they make us particular individuals. They form what we are, and that is in Pali called bhava. And when we are something, someone, some person with his particular individual likes and dislikes, with his individual habits, with his individual attachments, then even if death strikes us, or even if death strikes our body, these desires, attachments, and this whole individuality will continue. They want more, and they're gonna find it somewhere. Now it has been already, I think, more than 100 years been researched, even in the West, the various modes in which consciousness and the mind seem to be able to function independent from the body. Now they can measure what is happening with the brain when a person is in deep sleep, or when a person is in deep meditation, or when a person is hypnotized by somebody, and they can measure that the brain activity becomes very low, that at times there's barely any measurable brain activity happening. But it has been found time and again that especially in such conditions people think more clearly, people have more vivid experiences, people can know things that in their ordinary waking consciousness they do not know, seemingly proving that the mind can function independent of the brain, and that it can function very often much better than with the brain. Apart from that, there have been made many studies already about children who can remember their past lives, who remember, I've been George, I lived on the West Coast, such and such things happened before I died, these were my children, these were my parents. And people tried to go to these places and made research whether what the child speaks is just foolishness. And they found there have been hundreds, probably thousands of experiments been made where they found that there are many children who actually can remember past lives. They know things that happened a few years before they were born in some place they never have been, and they know very precise details. So that is part of the problem, or that is part of the cause of the problem, that you can't escape dukkha even with death. So even if you die, it's all going to continue. Now, there is certainly some benefit in the fact that we forget our previous life when we want to start off a new life. Otherwise we wouldn't be very effective with a new life. And usually we start off into the new life with some particular intention of what we want, or we died in the previous life with some particular intention what we still want to accomplish. So if we remembered all the dukkha of the previous life and carried that around all the time, probably we wouldn't be able to very efficiently live this life. So that's why often children can remember these things, but because there's little purpose in it for them to remember it and keep that in mind, because there are limits to what a person can keep in their mind. So usually people forget. And even those who remembered as a child certain things from their previous lives, usually the older a person gets, the more they forget. But then there's a third noble truth in which the Buddha declared there is an ending to it. There's a possibility of coming to an end with the journey. Of course, as long as we enjoy the journey, it shouldn't come to an end, but it should just become more and more joyful. So some people, they want just to have a better journey, and that's okay. But the Buddha suggests that we should have some goal to strive for, rather than just it should all improve, because it can't all improve. only certain things can improve at the cost of others. So we need some goal, something to strive for, something that for us would mean the end of the journey, something where we would feel, if we would have that, that's it. We would be happy. There's no more anything else that we would want. So, of course this is something for each person to discover what that could be and to define. As our comprehension of existence grows, we realize that everything is somewhat interrelated and interconnected. So if you strive for something in the phenomenal world, whatever it is connected with other things. So usually the other things that you might not want are part of the package. So there again the Buddha would step in and declare there is something that is utterly disconnected from the whole of phenomenal existence, from the whole mass of interdependent phenomena, something that is entirely free and entirely unconditioned by anything. And the path there too is the Noble Eightfold Path, a path made up of 8 things, the first of which is right view or right perspective. Now, right view and right perspective is precisely those things that I just stated, that there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, and there is an ending of suffering. Or taken differently, right view means a certain belief or acceptance that there is such a thing as karma, that there is such a thing as rebirth, and that there are samanas and brahmanas, that there are accomplished human beings who have realized this world and the world beyond, who have gained some comprehension, some deep and profound comprehension about the nature of existence, about the entirety of existence. That is what the Buddha called right view or right perspective, the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. Then, based on having a right perspective on life, even if we don't see karma, even if we don't have any proof of rebirth, just finding it reasonable and being willing to see that it might be true would to some degree fulfill this first factor. And if we have that, then our thinking will start to follow that perspective. It's quite similar to what I stated in the law of becoming, that because of consciousness, vijnana in Pali, there is nama rupa. So in this case, the view, the perspective is something quite similar to the consciousness. And based on that, the thinking will work. So we start to think more often when we experience something difficult or disagreeable, we start to think more about that it might have something to do that we have created the causes for ourselves somewhere in the past. That we experience unpleasant results because we put into place wrong causes. So we begin to, instead of just always complaining about others and about how difficult our life is, we begin to think more about Dhamma topics, more about philosophical topics. We think about karma, we think about the nature of life, and we think about that not just we have suffering, but that other people also have suffering, and that when they step onto our feet, intentionally or unintentionally, it is because they have suffering. So that we have, based on right perspective, we should have less and less thoughts of ill will arise, less and less thoughts of desire arise, greed arise. We see other people having better things than us. We see other people have things that we would want. We just, based on right perspective and right view, we try to change our mind and try to think of that other people have good things because they have put into place good courses in the past, while we might not have put all that good courses into place in the past. So that if we really would want something that we have seen others have, that instead of having greed arise, at least we start to understand something about life, and then we start working in a direction of getting something. That is perfectly valid for most people, to strive for something. Even striving for material things for many people is perfectly valid. It's much better than being idle and doing nothing and being immersed in suffering. So, based on this right view and right perspective, we acquire a right way of thinking. And we think less and less thoughts of greed, less and less thoughts of ill will, and less deluded thoughts. We become wise. We start thinking about life, then we slowly acquire wisdom. And then further, based on this right way of thinking, we begin to act rightly. It's not enough to just think rightly, but we also need to act rightly. But what does it mean to act rightly? What are the right kind of actions? Actually, if you understand right thought, or if you have right thought, then we will understand right action. Right action depends usually on the situation, what opportunities there are around you for right action. But some of the things that we find usually stated in the text are at first usually the first thing that usually comes is generosity, being generous, sharing what you have with others. That is a right action. The second is doing service for others, preferably somebody worthy of service. The third is moral behavior, which means you behave in a way that is not easily criticizable, in a way that is free from disturbing others, and you behave not criminal. That is basically the antonym. Moral behavior is basically the antonym of criminal behavior. So it's not something that you do based on how you feel. It is based on your cultural condition and your cultural situation. Usually these will define what is crime and what is not crime. But there are certain universal things that count almost everywhere as moral action, and while their opposites are criminal actions, such as killing another human being, murder, stealing things from other people, wrong types of sexual activity, such as raping or having sexual intercourse with somebody who's married, and such kind of things. Then the third is telling lies, refraining from telling lies. That is universally accepted to be a moral necessity. And at last, to abstain from drugs and the things that cause negligence and that cause you to do things that you know to be wrong when you're not intoxicated. So the main point is that even you know what is the proper thing to do and what you should not do, but if you're drunk or somewhat drugged, then you might forget that, and you might act counter your better knowledge. But then other forms of right behavior are reverence for elders, reverence for mother and father, and reverence for saintly people, or perhaps we might say religious people as a whole. Other forms of right action are giving out knowledge, giving Dhamma talks, or listening to talks on Dhamma, listening to talks given by wise people, or reading books that are productive of increasing our wisdom and knowledge of life. And another form of right action would be practicing meditation and practicing any kind of activity that develops the mind. Actually, all those things that in modern times what we call things like literature or music or art or architecture and so on, in ancient times they were called a divine science. There was a higher divine science of working towards perfection. And there was a lesser divine science or divine sciences of giving to the world some greater perfection than you find in raw nature. Finding harmonies and producing, developing some skill of creating harmonies and giving that out to others. These also come under right action. Now, of course, you can also, in modern times especially, there are also arts which do not produce harmony but rather the opposite. You can have some hate group singing songs about fucking nigger or stirring up a feeling of greater violence and more despair and so on. Now, this of course would not come under this factor of right action. Well, right action is about creating greater harmony and helping the world, making the world a little bit better. And then part of right speech, part of right action we already mentioned, the abstinence from telling lies. But this is another factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, to practice right speech, that we should learn. It's not whenever you fail to do it, then you're hopeless. It's something we need to cultivate. This whole Noble Eightfold Path is something we work on. Sometimes we may fail, but this is a road to perfection. If we become accomplished in each of these factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, then we have mastered life. We have become a perfected human being. So, and part of that is to learn to speak rightly, to speak truthfully, to speak in a way that is helpful for others, that is not hurtful, it is not harsh, that is not disturbing others, to speak in a way that is timely. Now, even you speak the truth when you state your friend or someone do something wrong. It might not be wrong entirely to criticize another person, but in the first place you need to do it skillfully, and you need to know when it is the right time. So if you want to teach somebody, you must know when it's the right time. Somebody's in a hurry, somebody is in a rush, or somebody is loaded with suffering, and then on top of it you criticize them for something. They become just more angry and agitated. So we need to know the right time for doing things, and we need to learn to speak in a way that is beneficial. We really need to, it's not just about only speaking truthful, but it also needs to help, it needs to somewhat be beneficial to make that truthful statement. If it's not beneficial, then we should not utter that speech, even if it's truthful. And we should avoid speaking useless things. Most people in this world speak useless things. If we seek perfection, if we seek to become a perfected human being, we need to learn to keep silent. when we have nothing weighty or nothing important to say. And then further than that, as the next factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, we have the factor of right livelihood. Now, of course, as this follows naturally, right perspective, right thought, right action, and right speech, but it is naturally something that still needs to be talked about. So, now, of course, if you have right thought, right action, right speech, then you will not earn a living by killing another being, usually. But sometimes this is not also clear for some people. So the right livelihood includes not earning a living by killing other beings, harming other beings, supporting violence in any way, by selling weapons, by selling poison, by selling things that harm other people. Now, all these things we should avoid as a form of livelihood. Then we also equally should avoid any form of gain based on deceit, cheating people, tricking people, somehow beswindling people, not doing honest trade. All these are wrong forms of livelihood. So if you know what you should not do, then you might, with some intelligence, work out what you can do as a form of right livelihood. You can do some good projects that help others, or any kind of honest occupation would come under right livelihood if you execute it wisely, justly. Then that constitutes right livelihood. So, but apart from not doing things that harm other people, not doing things out of greed that deceive other people, we also should not support things that confuse other people, that produce greater delusion in people. So, such as dealing with liquor and alcohol and drugs, as well as perhaps making some business with selling untruthful knowledge. Now, if you're a reporter, a journalist, and you give out news which is not all that true, all these forms of livelihood would constitute wrong livelihood, the opposite of right livelihood. And if we become accomplished in that, then we can put more emphasis again on our own mind, which is the next factor in the Noble Eightfold Path, to develop the capacity to put forth right effort. So what is right effort? To abandon unwholesome thoughts that have arisen within one's mind, to prevent unwholesome thoughts or evil thoughts to arise in the first place within one's mind, to develop right thought, right states of mind, and to learn to maintain wholesome mind states for ever longer periods of time. So in the beginning we stated the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is right thinking, but there we talk about it more in a general manner. You learn to off and on think rightly. When things happen, you should learn in life to think rightly. But here, as a factor of right effort, the task is to really learn to systematically abandon all unwholesome states of mind, and seeing always as much as possible to keep up the effort to not have unwholesome states of mind arise in the first place, and to frequently or to cultivate the capacity to inspire the mind and to bring in wholesome factors of mind, wholesome mind states, wholesome thoughts, wholesome emotions, and to develop the capacity to maintain such wholesome mind states for ever prolonged periods of times. So now this is really about right effort. Now, of course, I talk about all this in a sequential manner, and to some degree there is a sequence to all the factors of the Eightfold Path, but in another way they are also simultaneously existent. You need some right effort. You need to put forth some effort to acquire right perspective, and you need to put forth some effort to have right thoughts, right action, right speech, and so on. And all the factors that I will mention thereafter, they also will support the factors that we stated prior to them. So, but the fact that they are mentioned prior to them doesn't mean that you kind of can forget about one thing when you do the next thing. You can forget about one thing when you do the next thing, but after you finish the next thing, usually other things become again relevant. So it is, each part is relevant at a certain time. So this is perhaps even more obvious when we say that the next factor of the Eightfold Path is the capacity to develop clarity of mind and mindfulness. So mindfulness, I always found, you don't really easily understand what it is. Some people have this idea of present moment awareness, that you're just kind of like an animal. You just see a tree as a tree, you hear a sound as a sound, and that's it, that you're free of conceptualization and preferably free of thought. But that's not what is meant with mindfulness, and that's also not what the Buddha talked about as mindfulness. And mindfulness, the word sati actually is not just awareness. It comes with something like memory as well. So what is usually translated as mindfulness is actually the capacity to clear your mind, a certain capacity to develop clarity, either by paying attention to your body in an intelligent way, or by paying attention to another person's body in an intelligent way. That is always internal, external. You can do certain things, or by becoming aware of feelings, whether you feel happy, whether you feel unhappy, and also whenever you feel neutral, as well as in others, that you become aware, that you're becoming more sensitive as to know whether another person feels happy, unhappy, neutral. Now this is what I mentioned under right speech, especially, that you learn to not only blurt out any kind of truth, but that you see whether it's beneficial. And for that you also need this quality, this capacity to clear your mind and to pay attention to what is there now. It doesn't mean that mindfulness only means being aware of the present and what is there now. It's a capacity, it's a great capacity of the mind to estimate the future and to remember things from the past. And in fact, you can use memories of the past and estimations of the future in order to develop clarity of mind. Such as when you remind yourself that now you're in a tempting situation. If I cheat that person a little bit, then I will have a lot of gain. If you then think of either certain things that you have learned in the past, such as you heard about people getting caught in the end very often, or you heard about the law of karma, that if you do evil actions at some point in the future, you're gonna get bad results. Or if you estimate that I steal now, I cheat now, I do something unwholesome now, my mind tells me I'm gonna get much profit from it. But estimating the future, I become more and more of a thief and of a dishonest person and so on. So you estimate the future and you look into the future, but you look into the future in order to gain clarity of mind. And that is also equally a part of mindfulness, that you use memory and anticipation in order to get clarity of mind. The Buddha usually gave these 4 foundations for things wherein it makes most sense to gain clarity of mind. Now, one is the body, your own and another one's. One are feelings, your own and another one's. The third one is a mind, that you learn to understand your mind. In order to gain clarity in regard to your mind, you need to study your mind. So you start to study, okay, this is a mind with anger, this is a mind with greed, this is a mind without anger, this is a mind without greed, this is a lofty mind state, this is a inferior mind state, this is a concentrated mind, this is an unconcentrated mind, and so on. And based on that, you learn which one is better also. It's not just not making any valuation in regards to it. It's just not just bare awareness. It's definitely also should come with a certain sense of discernment, with a certain discernment, that you learn to understand that a concentrated mind is much better than an unconcentrated mind. If you're concentrated you can more easily deal with life's problems. If you're unconcentrated, even there's not that much of a problem there or there, but any kind of nonsense you make a problem out of. So no, that's part of the skill that you need to learn, to distinguish which one is better than which. And based on that, you will learn to more quickly abandon certain mind states and not allow certain other mind states, beneficial mind states, to just disappear. And because you can feed them, you will learn how to feed the right kind of things and how to starve those things that you don't want. And that all comes under mindfulness. And another, the fourth foundation of mindfulness is Dhamma. Is paying attention to certain teachings that you have learned before and think about them intelligently in a manner that produces clarity of mind in this situation. And if you become skilled with that, with this seventh factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, then you might be in the right position to meditate. And it's very clear that the Buddha did not prescribe meditation as the all universal medicine that everyone should take. Some people will be much better off if they meditate. Some people will be much worse off if they meditate. So usually those who haven't cultivated those things that I've just mentioned before, they easily can end up in a worse position through meditation than they were before they started meditating. So now this is very clear that the meditation is somewhat, to some degree, at the end of the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, of course, if you are not able to meditate at all, if you're not able to calm your mind at all, then all the other factors become much more difficult to accomplish. Now, you won't have any interest if you're not somewhat refined a little bit and you're not capable of a little bit calming yourself and so on, then you're usually not very interested in accomplishing some right view and right perspective, and you are not interested in having right thoughts and doing the right things always and so on. So these things are interrelated, but there's still a certain definite sense in stating them in sequence. And what the Buddha called right samadhi is this capacity to dwell in yourself, independent from sense desires, to find a heaven in yourself. Now, first, by applying your mind to some meditation object or meditation subject, something that is meant to make you interested in inner things, in exploring your inner world. So now you apply your mind on that. You develop some inspiration in that whatever meditation subject you have learned. You develop some inspiration in that it's going to get you somewhere, that it's somehow going to be beneficial for you, and that it will help you to explore the inner world. And if you, based on right inspiration, you apply your mind, you will usually apply your mind rightly. You can apply your mind wrongly, and you can apply your mind rightly. And if you apply your mind rightly to your meditation, then sooner or later you come to a condition of sustained inner awareness. You dwell in yourself for some period of time. Which means now you don't need to apply your mind anymore continuously, but you apply your mind and then it stays inside, and you realize something. You start dwelling inside yourself. Your mind becomes established and for a sustained period of time within yourself, either within your meditation subject or within what relates to it. And if it's the breath, then it may be also the breath energies in your body, which the Chinese call it the qi, the Indians call it the prana. These things relate to your meditation subject usually, and when you apply your mind to the breath and you become aware of these energies within your body, and you find you can sustain your mind by paying attention to these energies, and this is your meditation is unfolding. And you should always go from the coarser things to the subtler things. If there is some chance that you can stay with the subtler things for longer a period of time. And if you move too fast from a coarse subject or object, like your breathing, for example, to a subtle thing, then easily your mind will drift again, and you will not be able to accomplish the shift. So it is a skill that needs much time to develop, to know when you can stop perpetually applying your mind to your meditation, and when you can let it continue by itself for some time. Usually, if you allow it then to continue by itself for too long, then again your mindfulness will go down, and you will lack, your clarity will diminish. So then you again need to apply your mind. And if you do that long enough, then sooner or later some interest arises, joy arises, happiness arises, and based on that you attain a unified experience, an experience of a full samadhi, a full samadhi experience. Usually the last factor is often translated, often said to be one-pointedness of mind, but many people have realized that that term can easily mislead a person. So I sometimes call it unity, full unity. The point is, you should understand that meditation is about this kind of pleasant experience, something that you definitely would want more and more. So if you become skillful with this game of sometimes applying your mind, sometimes being able to sustain the whole experience, sometimes having some joy arise, and sometimes this kind of full samadhi experience, this full meditative experience where you're fully inside, you're bright, you're intelligent, you have wisdom arise, your mind is clear, and you're joyful, then that's the first jhana, it's the first meditation experience. And slowly, if you develop more and more the skill of these factors, of skillfully using these factors, and slowly you will be able to abandon more and more the need for applying your mind to your meditation. Automatically your mind remains inside for longer periods of times, and automatically whenever your mind goes inside, it immediately realizes the incredible benefits of dwelling inside, and based on that it is joyful. Now I'm rid of the world, I'm rid of all this trouble that comes with interacting with other people, all this trouble with work, with this, with that, the weather and whatnot. You become happy, you found your own heaven. So, and slowly, if you become skilled with it, slowly you can very quickly move into that condition of being joyful, and without having to apply your mind inside more than a very short time. So if you can abandon this need to apply your mind, and if even this perception of your attempting to sustain your mind diminishes, and you're just happy inside, even without any attempt to sustain your awareness inside, you're just happy inside yourself, and the clarity is there, and clarity may fluctuate, but often on is there, but you're all the time happy in it. Then that's the second jhana, the second meditation. And when you even can, when you become very accomplished with that, so that even this kind of coarse happiness, even this happiness starts becoming coarse, and you just feel very, very content and very clear. Now you find that this happiness sometimes is detrimental to your clarity of mind. Initially, it's what makes you more energized and more clear, but slowly you realize that without that, you could be more clear and wise and balanced. So now slowly you become just not joyful happy, but like a peaceful happiness, peacefully happy inside yourself. And if you have that, that is called the third jhana. And this equally has to, you will have to see to it how to maintain it. It's each jhana is another kind of set of skill that builds up on the previous ones. So you need to learn how to be in this balanced, happy condition for prolonged period of time. Now you might have balanced, happy conditions even from the very beginning, but it's a matter of really learning to have these for longer periods arise, so that you're for longer periods out of the world and in the world of heaven, of your own heaven. And now when you become accomplished with that, then you can even contemplate that even the happiness is somewhat lacking in balance, so that you start aspiring for the perfect clarity and perfect happiness, or no, not happiness, the perfect clarity and perfect balance, so that even any kind of joy and happiness will be kind of in the way of your clarity and your balance, so that you want to get rid of them, but for the good of it and not for anything worse. It's all for being able to dwell in loftier and loftier states of mind. Yeah, and this is usually the standard teachings in regard to the Noble Eightfold Path. So the four jhanas, the four meditative attainments. There are other attainments, the immaterial attainments, but they are somewhat based on this fourth attainment especially. And the fourth attainment is this condition of perfect balance and clarity. And if you attain that, if you can attain that for longer and longer periods of time, you're gonna be wiser and wiser and wiser and wiser, and you're gonna realize many things about the world and about the other world and about karma and the mind. Usually it is often described as like similar to standing on a mountain, and looking down on your life as a person looking on a mountain would look down on the villages and all the busyness of people's life. People in some small town in the valley, they go there, they're in their little road, they cannot see much to the left, they cannot see much to the right, they see a little bit ahead, they don't see what's behind, and they move like ants back and forth, and they have a very narrow view of what they're doing and what is happening around, while the person who stands on the mountain, he has a perfectly clear view of what is happening, and he sees all the relations that people have, all the interactions, what happens when that person, he left that person, but he still sees what the other person continues to do, meaning he has a perfect view on life. He stays in the elevated position, and for him time is very different. Time is much more spacious, and he might find much joy in spending his whole day on the mountaintop and just watching one or two people, and he can see that person with ever clear mind state, while for that person the mind always changes, and he always does ever the same things and the same mistakes, but he doesn't realize anything. So while the person on the mountaintop, he can see everything with great clarity. And that is precisely the reason why we should try to develop such meditative attainments, but with the understanding that these meditative attainments can only be properly attained, properly accomplished, when all the factors of this Eightfold Noble Path have become also accomplished. Now, when one has become quite accomplished with all the factors of the Eightfold Path, so all the factors of the Eightfold Path somewhat lead to this state of perfect samadhi, which is the perfect condition for enlightenment, which is what the Buddha recommended us to aspire for. So that is this talk about the Noble Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. May anyone having listened to this talk gain some inspiration to put forth the effort to become accomplished in this Noble Eightfold Path in order to attain the state of highest perfection.